Welcome to another video on the Slambretta build. Look how much room we've got. All the scooters have gone into the old workshop and I had to tidy up. Let's have a quick look around. Garage isn't by any means perfect. There's still a load of old cement I need to get rid of. Next time I have a skip in. But the scooters have gone from underneath the car lift here, which means I'm able to put the hot rod on these trolleys, push it under there. You can see there I have built a lovely base frame for the metal bender. Really pleased with how that came out. Everything's on wheels as well, so it can all get moved around to make full use of the space. But it just gives me all this area now to build. I can get all the way around the Slambretta here, because on this episode I want to get all the panel work ready for paint, including the rear loop here. The forks and links have come back from Steve, but I want to get into that a bit later on. Before I start sanding and preparing all this for paint, there's a little list here of things that need attention. I will start with the panel, if I can do this one-handed. And it just needs finishing off around here. Body line sort of goes up to where it would have gone originally. There was a little cut out there, but I've had to cut all this around here, and I can't just leave this like this. It needs finishing off. Ideally I would just run a bead around there. This won't fit in my bead roller because obviously the shape of the panel and the panel's curved just physically won't go in there. Now off camera I did start messing around with a bit of 6mm bar. But I'm still not quite sure how to do this. Looking from the inside of the panel here, here's a little bar thing I've made. You can see it's quite a nice fit there into the shape of the panel. I've just been overthinking this for a while. So I'm just going to try and mark this out. Just keep trimming away until it sits in there nicely. After much fettling with this thing, super nice fit there. You can see it's just sort of proud, so it kind of mimics this. It's not exactly the same, but definitely good enough. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna get this cleaned up around here, all the paint, and then I'm gonna tack it probably from the rear to start with. I'm not sure the best way to tackle this, whether I'm going to weld it all on this side or just weld it from the other side and just put a smear of filler. Let's see. Really pleased how that's fitting. This is done for now. So I did weld most of it from the other side. I put a little bit of weld in there. Now I could spend a couple of days getting this absolutely ground flat completely, but you know what, this is the inside of the panel. I'm just going to put a smear of filler around there. It's fine. Ground it down a little bit. Obviously you won't be seeing that anyway. Outside, same thing. I'll just put a tiny smear of filler around there. Once that's painted, see what it looks like on the scooter anyway. I've just got to try and rattle through these jobs, otherwise I'll be months doing bodywork. You can see there the effect there. So it looks like this body line kind of runs all the way up and over. Actually really pleased with that. Finishes it off. So once that's all painted, it's going to look nice. Put the other panel on as well, just keep a bit of dust off the engine, etc. You start to get a vibe for it. Got to move on. That's only one thing off the list of things to do. Next I want to have a look at this toolbox, because obviously I want to paint this at the same time as everything else. And I'm just trying to think ahead a little bit here. This is where all my Acai controls are. And if I'm riding down the road, I may want to be leaving this door open and adjusting the air ride, etc. But at the moment, that thing is just going to flap around. My idea is to put a little strut, pretty much the smallest little struts I could find. However, they are really stiff. and I think maybe too stiff, but I'm trying to fit them anyway. Nothing really to lose. I've already got the things. I've just put a cable tie over that one to keep it closed, just to make sure it will fit inside there. It does just about. When it's extended, it should work. It does come with brackets, so I need to somehow weld a bracket onto the lid here and actually the toolbox itself. This is the inside of the toolbox. Definitely only going to need to fit one of these, but luckily I did buy two, so they've given you an odd selection of brackets, but it does mean I've got two of these. So if I put one bracket there and then the other one up there, and we'll just see if the thing works. Got these mounted. I actually gave up on the rivet idea because the first thing I thought I'd want to do is drill out the rivets when I paint this thing. I'm not sure, I just thought bolt it. So I've got some little M5 bolts. But next thing is I've got to try and get this thing on. And these are really difficult to compress. So I've still no idea if this is going to work. This could all be a massive waste of time. But let's just see if I can snap this into place. Oh, these are so stiff. There you go, it's clipped in. You can see the pressure, it's just pushing that out already. But if I can sort that little issue out, that works really well. There's just so much slop in these hinges. This is what's going to happen. It's going to come down, and then when you're travelling down the road, that thing's not going to flap around and rattle too much. But as you can see, it's just pushing out this side, the pressure on there. These cheap old toolboxes, where I bought these from, I'm going to check if there's a one with less pressure. That would be one thing. Maybe another lock, or even just move this lock over so it holds it in there. Don't know. But for now, that's the job done. Let's move on. If you remember from the last episode, this tyre is hitting and I need to trim that down a bit. And originally I used a big hole saw to cut out the top and bottom hole and then cut out with my grinder in between. So I think what I'm going to do is masking tape up the bottom here and just draw around, and I could just use my grinder. I've used that technique before where I just do lots of little slots with the grinder and then just use something to round that off. Got my welding blanket here, try and protect it a bit, but you can see what I've done. I've just sliced down with a grinder there, and now I just use my grinding disc to go through all of that. Do you know what, I've got that pretty much spot on, just using my little die grinder thing. Nice curve on that. I offered up the hole saw, follows that really nicely. The moment of truth whether this wheel or tyre is going to clear. Oh, and it does. Thank goodness for that. 5mm is 5mm as clearance. If you remember from last time, I did increase this bump stop a little bit, so let me take this extra bit off. Hopefully that will then get it to come level at the back, and we can see if it's still clearing. That frame is back completely level again now. Took off that extra bit of bump stop and just about got clearance. I reckon there's like 2 or 3mm. But that'll only get better obviously as the tyre wears down, so I'm not worried about that. Oh, I'm so pleased to get that back down level again. Gonna have a little tidy up now because the garage is a complete mess. I'm actually going to pull these bits off and then kind of bolt them down so they're in the exact position, because next I want to start tackling that mudguard. I'm not going to go into too much detail with the forks and links. I am generally really pleased. Steve's done a great job. There's just a couple of little issues, and that's pretty much because he didn't have the scooter when he was building these links, so he was doing it at home on his jig. This is where the wheel needs to be, just almost touching that fork there. That gives me a nice level stance, etc. I don't think Steve ever had these completely maxed out, and what happens is this bulbous part of the shock gets further and further down, and now that hits on that part of the link, so that needs trimming back to allow this to fit properly. For now, is just put the shocks on there just so I know how much clearance I need for my mudguard. The other issue is he's cleverly linked the two links together. There's a loop bit which goes around the back, which is a great idea. It means the links work as one. However, the way that is angled, it's pretty much the first thing to hit the ground. So what needs to happen, I think, just need to cut that off, probably just tilt it a few degrees up and weld it back on. So at some point the links may have to go back to Steve just for a little change. Now with this tyre bottoming out on the forks there, that gives me a space between the two shock mounts of about 9¼ inches. The shocks I'm going to be running, the minimum they go to is 9½ inches, so in effect it'll never quite get to this extreme where the tyre touches the forks. If I build the mudguard to just sit on top of this wheel, once I fit the shocks, that'll give me 1/4 inch of clearance for the mudguard. But we do have to make this thing fit, and you know, on the previous episode when I sort of concocted this mudguard, yeah, it was really badly fitting. Of course, the other thing to go on is this thing as well. Now, if you didn't watch the previous episode where I built this mudguard, you can go back, and I actually like sliced in another mudguard in there to widen it, just so you got clearance there of the shocks, etc. And then I extended it down, so that's all gonna kind of be one continuous thing. There's a big gap there between the horn cover and the mudguard. Doesn't fit well at all around there. There's a big sort of triangular gap there, not sure what's going on there. It overlaps there, pretty much the same on this side, I think. Yeah, just, you know, I roughly threw this thing together. This all needs finishing off, and this is all really roughly cut. In fact, luckily not to cut my fingers up on this. Once this is all finalised, it needs an edge in all the way around there, so that is a lot of work to do. I think I'm going to come back to it fresh in the morning. Good morning. It is a crazy hot day already today, this morning, and I just come out to the garage. I've been staring at this for a little while, and I think I've made some decisions. It does obviously need tweaking, but I kind of like the look of the mudguard from the side here and even from the front. But it was just bugging me a little bit that when you look at it from this angle, it just looks a bit too wide and flared. However, you're never going to look at it from that angle unless you're led on the floor, because generally you're going to be up here looking at it. I've got a good probably inch there, which is nice. It means the whole thing can go back an inch, and I think that will then allow me to trim this here nice and tight to fit against the leg shields. Just bring it in a little bit, I think will help the whole thing. And the other thing I keep thinking is that there's just a bit too much bulk here. So what I'm going to do is make like a cardboard template of the leg shield. And I think I'm going to try and replicate that. So that means trimming a bit off there. That moving back an inch or so, taking a bit off the sides, I think I'll just reduce the bulkiness. Let's just get into it. I think the first job is just to trim this back and get it fitting tight against the leg shields. Little progress update. This has been on and off more times than I'd care to admit, but it is getting there. You can see there's a nice little gap down there because obviously I need to put some kind of seal, rubber, whatever, just to finish that off. Now, I had forgotten that I was using a couple of the existing fixings. If you can just see it in there, which would have normally gone there. So you can see this mudguard's moved out and up, which is why we've extended the bottom down. But that's been good because it means every time I put it on and off, it's always locating it back in the same place. I'm going to bolt these together first before I bolt them to the leg shields. So I made a couple of little brackets, tabs, whatever you want to call them. They go through the existing hole in the mudguard, just allowing myself 3mm, just guessing, for a rubber separator. I'm going to mark and drill the horn cover, and I've got some little stainless steel M5 button head things, so you know you'll see them, but once it's all painted black it'll be fine. That's working really well. That's pulled these two together. I've got that nice 3mm gap there, but it has closed up, so I might just have to trim a little bit more off this. Now there's a bit of a gap there, so I think next I'm going to do another little bracket from the mudguard, and just so that pulls it in. What I will remind you about, this thing is completely twisted. I did try and twist it back into some kind of shape on a previous episode, and I think that is fighting me a little bit now, because this looks like it's off at the front, but you can just see that thing's twisted in real life. The thing, of course, the leg shields are completely battered as well, so they're not completely identical side to side. Made another couple of tabs here, and I've just got them bolted. I think what I'm going to do is offer it up now, and if I can find the exact position these are going to go in, I might just try and throw a couple of tacks on there, because this will be then part of the mudguard. So then I'll have these ones which were original. I'm going to cut down a little bit. These new ones here, and as I say, I'm going to drill some holes through here. These are the existing points on the mudguard, but I think they should have gone there. Now they're up here. And here's my new one. Fixing will actually be inside the toolbox. And this one should be hidden because the runner, floor runner, goes there as well. Bearing in mind I haven't even got nuts on there, but just fixing it in those 4 places, that is rock solid. If you look at the front, the wheel's slightly off centre, but it's kind of crazy because all I need to do is not even pull the mudguard, but just pull this leg shield a bit. You can see all the bodywork, it's just a little bit twisted. Once I pull that over, that mudguard is perfectly straight. So I think I just need to manhandle it a little bit and just tweak it. These leg shields are just such a state. I'm actually going to put a fix in here so it just pulls it nice and tight to the leg shields there as well, where I've got these clamps. So that's going to give me, well, 6 fixings in total. There is a little hole there, not sure what that's from on the original bodywork there, but it's not quite in the right place. I want my hole to be about there. Funnily enough, the existing hole that's already there is kind of in a completely different place on this side. Is that to hold trim or something? I can't remember. Anyway, and that's then going to pull this part of the mudguard out tight. This mudguard is all bolted up super firm now. It's a decent gap all the way around. Going to need a rubber just to get over the gaps there against the bodywork, but it's pretty solid. And now I want to just trim this off, and I want to follow the line of the leg shields here. So got a piece of cardboard with a nice flat bottom which I can kind of move up and down. So I'm just going to trace the line here. And what I'll do is I'll cut that off, and I can just slide it along and then trace it onto the mudguard, and we should get the same curve as the leg shield on the mudguard. See how that looks? Just allow for that piece there, drop that down and shuffle it along. You can see what I need to chop off. It's not a huge amount really, but I'm going to get some masking tape and just mark that. Before I draw this curve on here, I need to get this correct along here, so it all flows. It's the same height from the ground, and I just realised it did dip down a bit, so I've just got my laser out. Shows me exactly where it should be. Now I can offer up my curve template, and actually, yeah, that's what we need to cut off. Nice. I've had this laser level for quite a few years, and I've just realised you can fit an adapter, stick it on your tripod, so you can just really dial in the adjustment, get that precise. And then obviously it's got this laser line as well, so I can line that up with that, and then we get a perfect line. That line now really works for me. Before it kind of stuck out in a weird way, it looked like Darth Vader's helmet, and it's just taken a bit of the bulk out of it. pulled this off again. I've got all these brackets welded up. It's not the neatest, it's all going to be hidden because the horn cover goes around all of that. The next thing I want to attempt is to kind of do this body line down there through my bead roller, but where I've welded these pieces on, they don't feel that secure. I just cleaned off the paint inside there. I'm just going to throw some extra weld all along this little joint here on the inside just before I attempt any bead rolling. I can grind all this down and finish it off later, but that's rock solid now. Dug out my bead roller and I've put the smallest bead on. There's 3 different sizes came with the bead roller, and I've just been experimenting a little bit with a bit of scrap metal. This is definitely not the same as on the Mudguard, but at least it'll give it some kind of detail. And I'm just thinking if I can kind of blend it into the existing somehow. Definitely something on the edge. I could put a bit more of that 6mm bar, the same as I did with the panel, but doing that around the whole Mudguard, which would be, you know, weeks of work, I think. It's working out pretty good. Needs a little bit of work here, obviously. There's a tiny bit I need to infill there. Sort of body line, if you want to call it that, kind of works into mine and it gets down to there, so I'm quite pleased with that. For the rest of it, what I'm going to do is try and fade out this body line here and just tip the very edge, because that will then match what's happening with the leg shields. It'll make sense in a minute. Once I've done it, I'll show you. So I'm going to just try something else now and just actually spin this over and use like half the bead. So it's literally just going to tip the very edge in. I've got to be really steady with it, because if I just wander off, it's going to make a right mess. Yeah, not quite what I was after, but again, I think a little bit of tidying up with a hammer. At least it gives it some kind of edge detail. This side came out really well, really pleased with that. But I've had a bit of disaster on the other side because it's completely bent this out of shape. So I'm going to have to try and, well, maybe offer it back up to the skewer and see if I can get that back into shape. Actually, it bolted up again fine. It was quite easy to pull this back into shape. On this side, it's got a weird little lump bit there. I'm sure I can knock that out with a hammer. Obviously, it needs a bit of joining here, the old bumper to this new piece. Maybe a little bit tidying. I'm sure I can do this with a body hammer. This side, there's a couple of weird bits there. So I'm just going to pull it off again, weld up this little gap on each side and just see if I can get it out with a body hammer a little bit. This took way longer than it should have, but pretty much got the Mudguard done enough to the point where I can sand it down and add filler. Welded on these tabs, just trying to make my life as easy as possible for the assembly. So I've got 4 holes there, that bolts onto there. Gotta get rid of this little badge. Look how wonky this badge is. And just smooth that off. Let's just bolt it all up and see what it looks like. This has been about a day and a half's work, and it's by no means perfect, but it's good enough for the Slambretta, I think, and with some filler it'll look half reasonable. Pretty pleased, to be honest. Fixings there for the horn cover. Obviously got a couple of really beefy fixings up there as well. There's a bit of a gap here, but I'm hoping a rubber is going to cover all that up. And it's pretty solid. This is all bolted in. It's as solid as a standard Mudguard for sure. The only slight thing I'm unhappy about, I've got a nice curve here. I did do a bit of bashing with a hammer, and that's really well, but on this side it slightly dips in. Now you can actually push this out. I think they call that oil canning. Not sure what to do. I have seen some people like put a gas torch, so I might even try that. And like I say, this is slightly off centre, but all I need to do is move that So when I bolt the leg shields in, I just need to bolt them down, and then that's perfectly in centre. So I'm pretty happy. I want to move on just quickly. There's one other thing, and that's this bridge piece. Now, this bridge piece is from a Series 3, I believe, or even a GP, I'm not sure. But I looked at buying one for a Series 1/2, and they're like £20, and people say they don't fit very well, the new repop ones. So to save 20 quid, I think I'm just going to cut this one down. That way I can follow the profile. Just through the rear running boards on, just to get a better idea. And there we go, I just trimmed it to follow the curves slightly. If I put a piece of trim in there as standard, that'll be fine, take up any gaps. I did have to re-drill the holes. It looked weird with square corners, so I've just rounded the corners off. Once it pulls tight, it's bolted down, it's going to look fine. Follows this line quite nicely there. I welded up the old holes there, but it's going to pull in tight like that. Save 20 quid. I'm not sure what happened to that list I started with at the start of this video, but I thought of a couple of more things that need doing. Before I start any kind of paintwork, that airline should really be popping through around there. That's where the air ride system's going to live. Just drilled that out to 12mm, and I've got like a little rubber grommet there, which should fit in there pretty good. Pull off this air fitting here, so I can just slide that through there, nice and easy. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now, you didn't think I've forgotten about the front airline, did you? Of course I didn't. Just drilled another hole there. Much smaller grommet because it's a much smaller airline going to the front. That is going to go in there. So basically on this setup here, we've got this one going to the rear. So that's going to be a super easy connection there. This one will go to the front. It's going to loop down there. And then you can see just poking through. Before I get into the rear light and number plate situation, I want to bolt on the drag block bracket, drag block. I've painted that a nice shade of satin black. So let's get that bolted on first, because then that'll give us a bit more visual on the rear end there. If you haven't seen the episode making that drag block bracket, go back and watch that. And it'll make a bit more sense, but the idea is that it bolts up under there, and when you put the back end of the scooter down, you know, sparks fly up. I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen in reality or not, because I'm not sure there'll be enough weight at all. But anyway, it's dragging on a piece of titanium rather than the back end of the scooter is the idea. So you can just buy a new one of those once it wears down, if it ever wears down, and put a new one on. So there is bracketry in here. So I've got to just try and get that up into there without scratching the hell out of the paint, as always. A bit like when I cut this hole out on the loop originally, it was with a really old tyre, which was almost bald, and yeah, I just didn't have clearance there. Well, it's the same thing happened with this bracket. I must have cut it pretty tight to that tyre, and now it is touching the tyre. So I'm going to have to pull this bracket off again and just make some more clearance. My newly painted bracket, I just need to bring this down like 10 or 15mm. I'm getting pretty good at doing these curved half circles or whatever you want to call them in there. Get that sprayed up, leave it overnight to dry. Let's pretend that drag block bracket thing is all bolted up. Rear lights. I did have this thing here, the standard Series 1/2 rear light, and if you remember previous episodes, I had to trim it obviously to fit around the wheel. This is getting less and less, doesn't even bolt onto the frame. I'd have to cut loads more out. It's looking a bit silly, just not really convinced how well I can secure that onto the loop. So I started to think about other options and looking at old model Lambrettas, like the Model D for instance, which has a number plate back-in bracket thing which bolts onto the mudguard on a Model D, and that actually holds the light. So I've got a box here, it's delivery from Cambridge Lambrettas, and it's a Model D number plate backing plate and a Scootopia rear light. Let's get those out of the packages. I think that's going to look pretty snazzy there. And then this rear light actually attaches to that. And the other thing I got to go with this are these little Model D spacers. I think these are aluminium. So it looks like I can use these existing holes on this, which is really good. Taking a bit of time to mark a centre line. I want to get the top ones as close to this hole as possible so it doesn't sit down too low, etc. And I was going to use the second from bottom holes, but actually that would put it right into the reinforcing bit behind there, so it would be very awkward to get a nut on. So I'm actually going to use the bottom holes, so they've got to go really close, tight as I can. I'm actually going to use this bottom line I've marked, I think, so I'm going to probably drill those first, and then wherever that ends up at the top. By Jove, I think this might just work. So I need to obviously get exactly the right length hardware, because it can't stick out that way because it'll hit the tyre, and it can't stick out the other way because it'll hit the number plate. But these are the little Model D spacers, which seem to work. And this should go there. Hey. This build has been a bit of a roller coaster so far. Some things have been a bit difficult to do. I've had to redo a number of things, and then other things have just worked out really well. And for me, this is one of them. This number plate holder and backlight has just really put the icing on the cake for me. I really like that. It looks completely kind of hot rod inspired, with a nod to an old model Lambretta. That is going to look so cool. I want to have a look at this issue, which I mentioned earlier. I've actually stripped off the paint, and you can see even more the issue now the paint's gone. Can you see that? Should be like that. And that's bugging me a lot. What I think I'm going to do is just try and prop that out, and then just heat that up and let that cool down naturally, and I'm hoping it will cool down and stay in that position. I just feel if I don't do this now, it's going to bug me, and then it'll all be painted. There's my little contraption, got a bit of wood clamp there. There's a bar that runs from the bit of wood, if you can see it under there, and it is just pushing that out into a perfect place. I did round the end of that bar, and it's pushing down to exactly the spot I want it to. A lot of people, once they heat these up, they do put a wet towel or something on there to cool it down quickly, but I'm not really trying to shrink it as much as get it to sit in the right position, because rather than dipping inwards, I want it to dip outwards. Well, that heated up much quicker than I thought it was going to do. I'm used to heating up like solid bits of metal, so that got hot really quick. Ow. Yeah, that whole panel's really hot. Make sure that Airlines not got hot behind it. No, it's fine. That's worked a blooming treat. But I can actually see now there's a little indent here. I knew it's going to be a bit of a can of worms. Got this dolly, which you're supposed to use this side off, I think, but it's got a slight curve on this side as well. So I'm just going to see. The trouble is I can't get hammering there very well. Anyone else have difficulty hammering left-handed? That feels way better to me, so I'm really pleased with how that's come out. I mean, it's obviously definitely not perfect. It's going to need a little bit filler, and even then I think you'll still see a little bit wavy, but at least it doesn't have a massive dip in, so yeah, pretty good. This is Future Scott, and those handlebars have just been plonked on to give you a little taste of what the whole thing's going to look like. As you watch this video, the scooter has already been painted, so don't forget to hit the subscribe button and notifications, because you don't want to miss the next episode. And I just want to thank you all for watching. Thanks as always for your support. Please give us a like and a thumbs up if you've enjoyed the video. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. We do have merchandise for sale. And just before I go, I'm going to go back in time this time to a few weeks ago when I attended an event in my old hometown. I'm at Retrofest 2026, which is a mixture of hot rods, classic cars, scooters, lots of different bands, Northern Soul, some rockabilly.
Well, that looks professional.
Right, Scott.
recording that. I'm not going out. Yeah.